I'm David Cutler, and this is Around the Block. We're here to help you learn about blockchain and related technologies with Circular Protocol. And today I have with me Sean Ogilvie, who is the Chief Product Officer, and Gianluca Denovi, CEO. So we're going to get right into some questions. First one is, Gianluca, what got you started with blockchain? You're at Harvard, you're in faculty, and that's a big leap to blockchain. Tell us about that.
Oh, well, I've been working with the US government for many years now. And during COVID, I've been exposed to some of the craziness of what was happening in the healthcare industry. All these new protocols for the vaccinations that were coming out without not so much control like before. So I was looking at better ways to ensure, the data integrity and the fact that if there is a clinical trial behind the drug, whatever is the amount of time that they have, a way to make sure that if something goes wrong, they couldn't change the data, just to get out of trouble. But if there is a liability, that liability is fully covered. So at that point, I started really going through the different blockchains, different layer one blockchains. And then I just realized that there was no layer one that was actually covering all the requirements that are needed for regulatory compliance. And then at some point, I was also looking, at the overall market of the blockchain, and I saw the technology life cycle of blockchains, and I just realized, hey, we are at the end of the probing. Usually the technology life cycle has a little slope, and then there is a steep slope that there is the mass adoption, and then there is a plateau, typically. And I said, we are just at the end of the probing of the market. So the mass adoption is coming and there is a gap on the market. So there is no blockchain that can actually meet these requirements. So I said, this is a great opportunity to have something that covers that gap. And then I said, I am the perfect man in the perfect time in the perfect place. And then I started building it.
How long ago was this?
I really had the epiphany about that in July 2022, and at some point I said to my partner, I said, I think I need to build a blockchain.
You had the time.
Yeah, that was like what really happened.
Yeah, interesting. So, Sean, how did you get involved with this? How did you meet Gianluca, and what's your blockchain origin story?
So we'd worked together, we'd been colleagues in the past. So my background's in enterprise software. So I don't have the healthcare background. However, I think like Gianluca, the sort of period during the pandemic and COVID was a bit of an eye-opener for me. And then, on top of that as well, I have some like family members who had issues with like the current healthcare system and with enterprise software, it's a very interesting sort of technological challenge and business challenges. However, I really wanted something that I could like wake up in the morning and feel that was important and passionate about. And once Gianluca started explaining more and more how this kind of technology can really assist in making these kind of industries much more transparent, it was something that I would do for free, and he really didn't have to convince me too much beyond that.
Were you guys working with each other at the time?
Yeah,
Yes.
I have to say that when I met this young man, he was very talented, and I noticed him, and I immediately, when I had this idea, I said, I'm going to have to involve Sean. Sean is the guy who usually, beautifies all the different products, all the software, and makes them look more friendly, more
I'm going
easy
to blush.
use.
If it keeps
So, and that was, I wanted to create like a team. And
Well, that's your job as the CEO, right? You're looking.
create a team around it.
Right. So you were working with big brands. What were you thinking that blockchain was going to do with them?
It was interesting. So that was a lot of it in the supply chain sector and the retail industry as well. I think that there's a massive market and opportunity there. But again, I had to ask myself these kind of questions, which was, do I feel passionate about, working in Web3 and enterprise software in the fashion industry and retail industry and things like this. Supply chain side was a little bit more interesting for me, but once the opportunity to work in something as impactful as healthcare came along, it was, like I said, really a no-brainer.
So we were looking for something purposeful.
Purpose, yeah.
Yeah.
Purpose is probably a good
That's cool.
term.
It took some time to do some due diligence
Yes.
on the project.
Well,
though.
good.
Yeah.
I'd expect he would.
You wanted to be very sure.
Yeah, good. Well, that's why we're here, right? So, which brings me to the actual mission statement, or the line for Circular's mission is to reshape trust in critical industries. Tell us a little bit about why that sentence is so important. It might feed into what you were just saying about purpose.
Yeah, so if you think about the current market landscape for blockchains, you're going to find out that 99% of all the applications are the same, and they are in the crypto space or DeFi or anyway GameFi, and very similar industries, and all is about tokens, tokenomics, and anything that is related with the token. But there are many other things that the blockchain can do. Blockchain, matter of fact, is a technology, so it can be applied in many other things. And the mass adoption for the blockchain starts when two things will happen. One thing is that will be mainstream, which being B2C. You know, everybody will want to use the blockchain for something, or will use applications that will require a blockchain. In this case, crypto. But there is another ingredient that is very important for that mass adoption, which is the enterprise and institutional adoption. And now we are at the point where all the different governments start looking at this industry in a different way. Before, you know, blockchain and crypto were associated, were the same thing, and that has been hurting blockchains. But that is where we need to be to have that mass adoption. So as soon as we build the right tools, the critical industries, which are essentially all the industry where most of the enterprises are working on, they need to have the proper tools.
Right.
So they cannot have only the same kind of applications, and that's what we are doing. It's not only the blockchain itself, but all the tools you need to build those applications. Indeed, Circular is not only the layer one blockchains, but all the tool set that you need as a developer to make all these new, more sophisticated application happen and make things easy for the enterprises.
So going back to your beginnings, you're working with enterprises. Was trust a big issue, getting in the way of things you're doing? Does that tie into how you saw blockchain as a way to tackle this concept of trust?
I think Gianluca described it quite well. There's a guy, Chris Dixon, he's a partner at A16Z, and he's got a fantastic book, which I recommend everyone go and read. Read, Write, Own is the name of the book. He categorizes sort of the philosophy behind blockchain and cryptocurrency into two schools of thought. Now that's the computer and the casino. Unfortunately, over the last couple of years, there's been some really high-profile calamities from the casino side, right? FTX being one. And this was something that was really put as like quite a prominent thing. And I think a lot of people struggled to really understand the differentiation between, you know, the blockchain and the crypto side. However, probably over the past year or so, as we've seen the ETFs and more mainstream adoption from, you know, very large enterprises like BlackRock, taking blockchain technology and cryptocurrency more seriously, we're starting to see a better understanding. However, I still think that trust is the biggest issue. You know, it's something that I think kind of plagues the industry still to a point. You know, there's a lot of people, just due to the nature of it being very anonymous. I mean, as we know.
Just today we have
Yes.
somewhere that said 90% is smoke and mirror, 10% is good, 0.1% is really good.
So yeah, it's just, you know, there's a lot of noise, and I think we're starting to get to the point now where you know, these large critical industries are starting to look at this technology more seriously, and they've got, you know, existing businesses, they've got existing reputations, and so they do a lot of due diligence when it comes to who they want to partner with, right? Which I think speaks to our project as well, and the background of, you know, the founders too.
Right. Well, ultimately, it's what you're doing, and that's we should jump into. Where is Circular today? I mean, you've been getting some momentum. Tell us a little about the products that you guys are working on.
Sure. There's a couple. I think the first one that comes top of mind would be the self-custodial wallet, Radial, which should be released in the next couple of weeks, actually. So this is a browser extension wallet, something that's very sorely needed within our ecosystem. We've also got a native mobile application as well, so another wallet on that side. An updated Explorer, I think, is something as well. one of the unique features of circular being a multi-chain architecture means that the explorer needs to work in a slightly different way, to be able to filter between different blockchains. And then on top of that, I think Chainman, which is probably something you could talk about. It's been your little pet project as well. So yeah, go ahead if you want to explain.
Yeah, no.
Chainman.
So when you develop a blockchain, you don't really just develop the blockchain, but you develop a number of instruments that are used for managing the development. And because I am an academic, I have the bad habit to make a lot of simulations, a lot of projections, a lot of statistics. So I needed to build a number of tools to measure performance, all these things. And we really pay a lot of attention on the numbers we put out there. So I just realized that as we approach the fall, we need to start to finally open the network to third parties, independent parties will be node operators. And how can we can make their life easier? And the idea was to create this dashboard that allows you to manage your own rig, your own mining rig. So you can have as many nodes as you want. You have a common interface where you can set up, you can see the performance of each one of them so that you can keep your rig up to date, make sure the software version is right on all of them. You can see your earnings, you can see your power consumption. So you can have all this kind of information. It's, all these tools to make life easier.
Well, is it because you know what kind of tools you need to make your life easier?
I mean, I've been running literally from one node to the other to make sure that everything was working properly. So at that point, you need to start building the proper tools to make the job. You really want to give to Web3 the Web2 experience. So Web2 obviously grew to a point where everything has been extremely comfortable, extremely easy and smooth. In Web3, you cannot expect, your old auntie to sign a transaction with a private key. You can't really do those kind of things. So you need to build tools to make any kind of operations from the B2C to the B2B smooth and easy, because that is translated in costs that you will have to cover if they are not smooth and easy. So if I want to have my little rig, I want to make sure that if I make a little investment, that there is a return. And it's not going to be too expensive for me to manage this rig, and it's just much easier for adoption.
So now you have some tools that you're making available for people to build on blockchain. How difficult is it to show up into these huge industries like pharma and insurance and healthcare in general, bringing new tools to them? What is that experience like, and how do you differentiate what you're doing?
We're totally not, because we have zero arrogance in this in what we are doing. We really like to see the market with the eyes of kids, literally like students, and that's how we're going to get into it. We're going to do this through the young developers, the freelancers, the people that really want to build something, or the small startups. So when you build the tools to create opportunities for them, they become the carrier of, it's like a virus, into bigger corporations, because that's how you create fidelization. If you learn to use something you feel comfortable with, you're going to put it on your resume, and when your next job, you're going to suggest to use that tool. And I think it is really building a genuine technology that is genuinely good, not because you just market heavily.
So it sounds like that was a breath of fresh air when you're meeting Gianluca earlier and looking at what are these tools that you're going to be making available that are hands-on and functional, so you can prove it, right? So, which kind of brings me into just one major side of this, which is obviously crypto and your background in high-performance computing, and how crucial is that for things like payment?
Well, crypto, I keep saying this, is not here as a temporary thing. Crypto is here to stay. It's only about how ready are we to embrace crypto. And as we move forward, we are learning that it's being, embraced more and more every year. And again, if you look at that life cycle chart, you really find out that what we have seen until now, even if everybody thinks in the crypto industry there is a lot of money, it's a nothing compared to what is coming. Because I think that if I ask to any crypto enthusiast, do you think in the next 5 years we're going to have 10 times the level of adoption we have right now? Then if the answer is yes, it means we are going to have 10 times more transactions, 10 times more products. Probably we are going to have, I would say, even 10 times bigger market caps. And right now, the industry, the crypto industry, is as big as a large stock.
Yeah.
But if you think about all the exchanges and all the stock around the world, it's nothing. As soon as all the enterprises will get in, this thing is going to become huge. And it is too good not to want to work with it. And everybody's learning that. Banks, governments, everybody.
The question that people ask sometimes in this transitional industry, what inning are we in? Would you say we are, in inning 1, 2, 3? I mean, we have 9 innings, let's say, for the ubiquitous use of this technology. How early are we?
I'm Australian, so I don't follow a lot of baseball, so innings is quite actually hard to reference. Do you watch baseball? I'm not sure.
I'm Italian.
Okay.
Soccer.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so as maybe the first inning is not the reference, but I want to go back to a bigger picture to you, Sean. Can we just back up a little bit and talk about where Web3 intersects with blockchain and crypto and enterprise? Is it possible to kind of give a bigger picture on where we're sitting and what we're looking at? Because you've been looking at totally addressable markets and those kinds of things. Let's just back up and talk about what market we're talking about here.
Sure. I think with our focus specifically at this point in time on healthcare and DeSci, decentralized science, I was just looking at some statistics in terms of the market sizes, right? So there are a couple here that would come top of mind. So I think one is around like health insurance and just that market in general. I think is roughly like a $2.4 trillion market. You've got clinical trials, which is something that we'll talk about probably later in this discussion. Something we're very focused on is a $51 billion market, give or take. This is by 2030, so there is some growth. And just in general, what was the statistic I saw the other day? Something to the effect of the amount of fraud in like the healthcare system accounts for somewhere between 3 and 10% of the expenditure, which globally, which is like between 100 and 300 billion dollars. So these are like very large industries. Yeah. And I think when we talk about healthcare and decentralized science, a lot of people just think, oh, like doctors and stuff, right? But when you actually start to drill down, look at kind of some of the numbers involved, I mean, these kind of industries is something that touches everyone, right? Irrespective of whether you're in technology or blockchain, we all need to go to the doctor. We all want to make sure that when we send our family members, to a hospital, that they're getting the best possible care and that it's transparent. And that, I think that's something that's really important. In order to have that kind of adoption by these kind of critical industries, we need to have a type of architecture that we've built. And this is to ensure that we're compliant primarily. And maybe this is something you want to sort of touch on.
The question I always ask to all the skepticals at the very beginning is, if you go in a hospital and there is a malpractice case against you, the hospital might have good reasons to try to hide that. Even if there is an insurance, there is a reputational element that is playing against you. The hospital will want to try to hide that anyway. Also because the insurance premiums go up. So I say and I've been in first person victim of a malpractice case when I was a teenager. Okay, so the question is always, if I ask you to pay $5 more, would you feel more comfortable to have a certified record or not? Because if the answer is yes, because a certified record means that whatever is in the record cannot be changed without being tracked. So they cannot go change the whatever is in your record if something happened. So if you feel more confident at paying a very little fee more, that little fee in that industry is a huge market. And it's giving to patients new instruments to protect themselves. Because it's true, I mean, all the healthcare professionals are heroes, and I have great respect. I've been working in this industry for all my life. But behind those professionals, there are managers, there are executives, and they have to run the numbers. So pharmaceutical companies is not new with the fact that sometimes they've been changing or embellishing data. So if I give you an instrument to certify clinical trials so that if someone gets hurt with a new drug, they cannot go there and change the number to look like they have zero liability, don't you think would be a more transparent, a better industry?
Yeah.
So if there was only trust, will be better. But blockchain has been teaching us that the trustless environment needs trustless tools, so that we can all sleep better. Especially if the cost of using these tools is not like such an impactful cost. So I think it's a no-brainer, the adoption. And it's only a matter of time until all these tools will be embraced by the regulation bodies. Everybody will be forced to use these kind of tools.
So we have these accountability tools that and these complicated areas require a user experience that can work within the system. Right? You talk a lot about, you're a product guy, right? Mm-hmm. Where does user experience fit in your day-to-day? Well, how are you concentrating on that? And maybe transition that into some circs and how the UX is very, very important to you, but also to us.
I think, if we're going to continue the conversation around like the enterprise adoption. So, as of today, a lot of the Web3 tools out there, a lot of the dApps are really targeted towards like the degens, as we call them. And it's still a pretty complicated user experience, right? It's very easy to forget your keys or to, we see all the time, like on chain, that people send millions of dollars to like the wrong address, or rather they'll send tokens but using the wrong network, and then all of a sudden those funds are like not recoverable. Obviously that's not acceptable when it comes to enterprise. So, I would focus on two things here, which is firstly chain abstraction, so abstracting away the fact that they're even interacting with the blockchain in the first place, and then wallet abstraction. So, as an enterprise, if you're a hospital or if you're a pharmaceutical company or something like this, where you're basically using a tool that's very familiar, so like a dashboard, very similar to like a Web2 like product, but in the background, you've got a wallet being generated. There is obviously the security of the keys there. But I think that's the key, and I know there's a lot of ecosystems that are looking at this idea of chain and wallet abstraction, and it makes sense because we're really at the early stages of blockchain and cryptocurrency adoption, and if we're going to start hitting the mass market, we can't have the kind of systems in place that we have now. We need to move past this, and I think an example would be like human readable addresses. You think back to the early days of the internet when, prior to email addresses, when it used to be handled all by IPs, right? We're kind of at that period now in Web3. Right now, instead of sending an address, sending a transaction to a long public key, instead I'm going to send it to johnluca.circular. Like, that's the equivalent of sending an email to his email address. Like, that is the point that we're at in terms of sort of the UX evolution. And I think that in the enterprise side, it's just much more unforgiving, and we need to make sure that it's a very seamless approach for them.
Do you want to back up and talk a little bit about where circs fits into your game plan?
Obviously Circular is a network like all the other networks as node operators, and you need to obviously pay these node operators. So you need a medium to pay these node operators. So you can call them credits, you can call them US dollars, you can call them whatever you want. It's still going to be a digital medium. So the circs is that medium that allows you to pay for transactions, and then at that point it makes no sense not to provide all the other functionalities that a traditional blockchain is providing. That being said, we like the idea of working and being reasonable. So there are things that has to be handled in a certain way because it makes sense to handle them in a certain way, and things that needs to be standardized. So for example, if I talk about tokens, or smart contracts, you'll find out that if you go on most of the blockchain EVM compatible, the 90% or even more of tokens, they are ERC20 tokens, and they have the same smart contract. So there are literally thousands and thousands of tokens that have exactly the same smart contract. So my question is, I am, an expert in performance computing. I like to optimize the code. I like to make things that go fast. If thousands of tokens are using exactly the same smart contract, just changing the name and changing a few other parameters, isn't it just easier to create a parametric token that uses the same smart contract? And that's why on Circular we have the traditional smart contracts, but we also have the parametric token. So if you have the need for a token does the few things that the normal token, the majority of tokens do, just go parametric. You don't have to audit the code. It's much simpler. So if you want to we didn't implement all the simplifications we are preaching right now. We are in the process, obviously. We got to start from the bottom. This Circular is not a fork of a previous blockchain. Circular has been built from the ground up. So with a bit more time, we will start implementing all these things to make everything easier. And building a token, just like the Cirque. Cirque is a parametric token.
How is that different from meme coins and their popularity?
Well, in this case, it's not a meme coin because it's backed up by a real technology. There is a real network. So the Cirque is the native coin for the network. So all the transactions, all the fees are paid with Cirque. Even if you mint a new token, if you do anything with any other digital assets, but the node operation, the smart contract execution is everything handled through the Cirque.
Okay.
For enterprises, we are not going to expose them to the Cirque. For enterprises, they're going to have accounts. They're going to buy tiers of services. They're going to have subscriptions. What is happening under the hood is going to be handled in Cirque. They are not even gonna know about that. That's just a way to make the experience of the adoption more common, more usual, more Web 2 from that point of view. But their IT departments, they will know that underneath there are a series of mechanisms.
So we did an AMA a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about proof of reputation. How does that unique feature fit into this point of view?
Okay, so I tell you one thing that struck me in my life when I was a young entrepreneur, a young consultant. I was very young, in my 20s, and I was working as consultant for enterprises. I was in Italy. Whatever price I was asking them was always too much, and the reason was obviously my reputation. The fact that not having a big reputation, being a junior, being very young, in their opinion, it doesn't matter what were my skills. I needed to prove myself. And instead, when you are a much more, a well-known professional, it is absolutely acceptable to be able to charge bigger fees and so on. It has nothing to do with the trust in your age, but in the trust in the previous, the previous work you've been doing. And so when I was looking at the consensus mechanism, I needed to know what I want to do: a proof of stake, a proof of work, what other paradigm was needed. So I noticed that I really loved the proof of work, but obviously the proof of work had a downside, which was the fact it was not sustainable environmentally. Even if today they come up with all their explanations about the type of electricity, still is not. So, but the proof of work introduced a lot of security because of all the work. So you need to build a block. It takes a certain amount of computation. So if you want to, tamper the entire blockchain, it's going to take a lot of computation to do that. So that is important. So I took the proof of work, but on a single node. So only one node does the work instead of using the paradigm of Bitcoin, where everybody's doing the work, and then we throw away all of them except the one
Sounds expensive.
that has been selected. It's kind of expensive. So, but then the proof of stake, from the other end says, well, we don't need all that work. The security comes from the fact that you have a stake that can be slashed if you have a malicious behavior. And then I said, yeah, but if you do this, you're going to create centralization, financial centralization. I want any student, any kid to be able to provision a node and run with it. So how can I obtain both things? So then for me, instead of slashing the stake, I slash your future earnings. So whatever you're going to make in transaction fees from now on is going to be less because you lose reputation if you do something wrong. And I'm not punishing you because otherwise you can steal something, because there is a consensus is very hard. But I want to make sure that you keep your node up to date. You make sure that this provisioning is always working in best conditions. So that is the only deterrent you have. So I kept the work, and I kept the deterrent of having something, a bit of skin in the game, and that's how the proof of reputation came. But just to make sure that everybody understand, the validity of a block is not determined by your reputation. It's determined by a consensus. Independently from your reputation, it's your earnings that are affected by your reputation. So
Built into the whole trustless
yeah,
concept.
if you're not provisioning if you're not taking care of your nodes very well, you are like the junior guy that doesn't have a lot of experience, is not working well, and it makes a little bit less money.
Yeah, yeah. So let's bring it back to the actual users. We have node operators, we have software developers who are also partners. Tie a little bit into your product hat, which is how important is the recurring revenue model in relation to what he was just talking about for our partners.
I know he's going to jump on at the end because this is something he's very, very proud of. But I'll start it.
He's a very smart guy.
Yes, we believe we've landed on a very unique incentive model here. So, in addition to the nodes and the protocol, who earn revenues every time a transaction is executed, developers who deploy the smart contract also earn a fee. And again, I'll defer to you for this point because I know it's around the efficacy of the code, and you can definitely wax lyrically about this. But we feel like this is a way to incentivize developers to build on top of Circular, to also crowdsource the efficiency of the network and sustainability of the network, because the revenues are based on the efficiency of the code. So making sure that we're not just getting a very congested network by having a lot of poor code, deployed on these contracts. And we think it's just a more equitable model, where if with any blockchain ecosystem, the developers are sort of the lifeblood. The developers in the community are the lifeblood of any ecosystem. So it's only fair that those developers are also rewarded when it comes time to,
We're starting
have the
soon with
transaction
that. I
fees.
mean, this is what we're doing now, building
Correct,
up that
yeah.
reputation as a community player. All right, cool.
Right.
Yeah, so imagine this. You are just a student, and you are a freelancer. This is something that happens very often, okay? So if you develop a smart contract for any businesses, doesn't matter that they own the smart contract, but you deploy the smart contract, you are going to earn transaction fees for every smart contract. This is very important because he's addressing a couple of different issues at the same time. Well, the first thing is that if you're going to earn from transactions, that allows you to make a better price, because you know that if you are not making a lot of money on the one-shot job, you're going to defer some of those earnings and actually earn probably more. From the other end, if you are the company or the startup that hires the developer for that smart contract, then you are probably going to pay less. So you're going to have lower entry barriers, because the developer, you tell the developer, you're going to get the transaction fees, and we're going to do a lot of transactions. So that becomes a way to, to counterbalance two issues. But the other thing is that if you are even simply a freelancer, you are not part of a company that does a lot of development, and you start collecting all these smart contracts that you build for all the other projects, you are compounding recurring revenues. So you can be as old as like 25 years old, and just with the 4 or 5 years of development, you're already making enough in transaction fees. So it's better than becoming a YouTuber, because if you get a lucky shot with a project that does a lot of transactions, you're going to share that success.
So that's the quote. It's better than being a YouTuber. Is that what
It's
we're gonna
almost
say?
better than being a YouTuber.
It's again back to the community and sharing, and the whole concept of circular is this ecosystem. Do you want to talk about auto-progressive sharding in relation to that? Is that a good segue, or?
I'm going to at first something more on the story of the transaction fees for developers. So the whole idea here is to incentivize the right behavior for every stakeholder. I'm not saying we finished, that we are finished, that there are other things that will come in the future, but we want to make sure that the nodes behave in a certain way because it's more convenient to act in a certain way. The developer write the code in a certain way because it's more convenient to write the code in a certain way. So it's about taking every stakeholder involved in this circle and try to give them the right incentives to do the right things, so that the welfare of this ecosystem is the welfare of everybody. That's why we say circular, because everybody is gonna earn something. There are no corners, there are no sides. Everybody's gonna earn on something. And you said, what was the other question?
Well, I didn't know if there's a segue to autoprogressive sharding. I was just going to tie those things together.
So anyway, there are several blockchains that use the sharding mechanism. Sharding is very just like a funky word to say that they, instead of having a big network, they break this network in multiple subnets. Okay, a shard is a subnet. And then what you obtain is that if the shards work separately, they can get transactions in parallel. So the final effect is that you can have a higher throughput. As a matter of fact, a lot of new blockchains, to be able to have higher throughputs, they have to have multiple shards. The only difference between our sharding mechanisms and what the other blockchain have is are these two things. The first thing is that in all the other blockchains, in all the other networks, the nodes within a shard are not benchmarked. They are any node. So that means that if I have a very slow machine and I have a very fast machine, they're going to get potentially the same amount of transactions. And because of the nature of the blockchain, it is a sequential data structure, you're going to go at the speed of the slowest one. Because at some point it's the turn of that, and at each consensus you're going to go at that speed. So if you have a very low connectivity and a very low computational power, you're going to go slow. And plus there is also the fact that you have to have these shards communicating between them. On circular, things are literally different because, first of all, we use the autoprogressive means progressive. It means that the nodes are benchmarked and they are progressively allocated on different shards, which means that on the first shard you have the slowest node, on the last shards you have the fastest nodes, and you let the fast ones move in multiple shards, which means that each node works with peers, so they go at very similar speed. So if in the low shard they are all small, slow computers, in the fast one, all fast computers. And then you have the network access gateway that now becomes something you need in the network, which you don't need in other networks, because that entry point, which there are multiple nags anyway, and it's not like a single point of failure, they propagate transactions in a proportional way. More for the faster, less for the slower, but ensuring that each shard can get enough transaction to become profitable, to have profitable nodes. But they don't interfere with each other. And the other difference, anyway, is the fact that on circular, the communication, the inter-shard communication, it's much, much smaller compared to other networks. The communication, the synchronization between shards, it's very light. So you can almost say that when you have two shards, you have double speed. It's not exactly like that. It's almost like that. But it's an extremely scalable paradigm, and it's one of the things that makes us very scalable and very fast. And about this, I'm going to also add that you don't see these right now because right now there's not much traffic and there are very few nodes. But when we scale up and there is more traffic, you're really going to see the difference because you're going to see the resilience of the performance when you have a lot of traffic. Which
sounds like you come back full circle to the question about proof of reputation. That's required to be able to have some of this throughput as well, right? The system is layers on top of itself.
Well, yes and no. I mean, yes, there is a part of it that is connected also with the performance because the consensus mechanism itself is quite fast in general. But even I would say that is more a coincidence more than something that was needed. That was really to turn around some of the issues, typical issues of layer one blockchains. I mean, if you have staking, not only you're going to have the problem of the financial centralization, but most likely you're going to have also regulatory issues. I think that is kind of...
Yeah. So is this time to talk a little bit about multi-chain strategy?
Sure, if you would like.
I would like, but how does
Just
multi-chain
explain what it is.
Yeah,
fit into that?
right. So, compared to other layer 1 blockchains out there, Circular is a multi-chain architecture. What this means is we support both public and private chains. So I'll break down maybe what these kind of blockchains are. So the first one is public permissionless. This is a very standard public network, so something like a Solana or Ethereum or anything out there. Anyone can participate. We then have public permissioned blockchains. I think an interesting use case for this kind of blockchain would maybe be like a video game. You want anyone to be able to participate, but you want some sort of certain actors who have control that can maybe adjust the game economy or introduce new assets into the game. So it's an environment where anyone can participate, but there are certain parties, let's say, who have special credentials. And then we have private blockchains, which is, I think, one of the unique features of Circular, and that's truly decentralized private blockchains, which is just something that's required for any critical industry, whether it's pharmaceuticals, supply chain, healthcare, and beyond. Typically with private blockchains, what will happen is when they need to spin up a private blockchain, they'll just set up some nodes somewhere in like a data center, which at that point is typically like, you might as well have a database. You lose a lot of the decentralization and a lot of the value proposition of actually having a blockchain in the first place. However, on Circular, you don't have to do that. So you can still use all the same nodes as the public blockchain, and you can spin up truly decentralized private chains without having to provision new nodes. So that's sort of, I guess, from a high-level overview, the different kinds of public and private blockchains that Circular supports.
Is there kind of a problem with making some of those trade-offs, or are we offering, do we have a favorite version of that for the markets that we're going for?
I wouldn't say a favorite version. I think that it's really depending on the type of end user or the type of entity. So if you're just a standard user, you're probably most likely just going to be using a public blockchain. However, if it comes to a pharmaceutical company or a hospital, they will not use a public blockchain. That's just a non-starter. So they need to ensure that they have a private blockchain which meets the regulatory requirements. So that's HIPAA, which I know you can speak more about, or even GDPR. So just an example, like, if I'm a hospital maybe, or maybe a pharmaceutical company running a clinical trial, in order to be compliant, I need to ensure that no nodes outside of, say, Switzerland or outside of the United States are actually processing any of the network activity. So only on Circular do you have that level of granularity and control to ensure that you're compliant for these kind of cases.
Sounds like media, it's getting more and more granular. You can have more value the more
specific
just
you get. Customizability, I guess, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have a couple of questions. We're talking about switching to the fun portion of it, and I'm not sure how deep we want to go, but I have a question I haven't asked you guys before, which is, what were you like when you were 5 years old, and how is that coming to light today?
You can start that one for sure.
I can't say that I remember.
Well, I was
really long
I was
time
talking
ago.
to your little boy earlier this morning, so I'm kind of seeing his father in his eyes.
I can say that I was playing a lot in the nature. I was not a city boy. I was almost a countryside boy, playing literally with my peers, hide and seek in the grain fields.
Mm-hmm. So that's the circular
Going for
ecosystem
fishing.
coming through.
maybe.
Seeing that nature is tied in with our technology. I don't know.
But on one thing, I was very consistent. When I was little, I was always saying, when I will be an adult, I want to be a scientist. I kept to the word.
That's there.
Yeah, I did not have that sort of that focus right from the start, but I was also an outdoors kid, so I grew up on like a racehorse farm in New Zealand and sort of jumped around a bit. As a kid, playing outside, getting bitten by mosquitoes, falling out of trees, drinking water from the hose and the tap outside. And And I didn't really have any aspirations. of-
Now he's covering himself with the bug spray because he's terrorized by the triple E encephalitis
Yes.
here.
Yeah, well, I mean, in Massachusetts now they've got this triple E virus. It's keeping me up at night. Anyways,
Talk about risk later.
yes, risk later. But yeah, look, I think it was really more in like towards the end of high school or college where I found that technology was something that was deeply interesting to me. You know, I have a specific taste for design. I feel like I'm very obsessed not with solutions but with the problem. And you know, when you start to add all of those things together, blockchain and industries as important and complex as healthcare, pharmaceutical science, and then DeFi and all of this, and just how many lives this touches, it sort of was quite a natural fit, but not something that I ever planned from age 5.
Well, it's interesting how we're transitioning because of our environment. We talk a lot about Web 2 and what people are expecting now and how do you optimize that, and how do we even prepare for Web 3 as that becomes clearer to what that actually is. I personally think Web 2.5 is a great way to talk about where we're at now because it's a transitionary time. What's it like, and I'll ask both of you guys, just what's it like working in a Web 3 oriented company that has this capability versus what you were just doing a couple of years ago, being either limited or Web 2 has its own idiosyncrasies from business models. How can you think bigger now that you have built these tools for not just yourself but for other people?
Oh, well, the driver of my entire life has been always the same, which is to do something impactful. I think that if you have the skills, the possibility to do something that can positively affect life of many, that's something you should probably try at least. And I've been putting that in front of everything else I've been doing all my life. And in part, I can say I did through my research. With circular, it's just different because it's more like of a free spirit. You know, it's you're not applying for a grant. You don't have like all the constraint of the university. You're doing this. It's an enterprise. Then it's your vision. And then you embrace the vision of other people joining the team, and that's the way I like to think about circular. It started as my project and is growing as our project.
That's cool. You talk a lot about centralization, decentralization, and how that's a core element of this. Where does is that at the center of the vision? The fact that you have to do all these technologies to actually allow decentralization to happen in a risk-free environment, is that opening up your ability to offer more value to people?
Well, decentralization is the soul of Web3. And again, it's the soul of Web3, not the soul of crypto. It's very important to understand the difference. Indeed, if you look, there are a lot of cryptos that are not decentralized at all. But what I really think it is very important is the decentralization. That's why for circular, the decentralization is not, can say, a compromise. Cannot be a compromise. On these, we are going to be Puritans. So we can compromise eventually on the performance. So we're going to find how to scale the performance but not without compromising, not with compromising the decentralization. That is the soul of Web3. And that is the very first time, I think it's an historical moment, and it's not a technology. It's a
philosophy.
It's a philosophy. It's a social change. It's
relationships.
A paradigm shift where you give back control to the crowd. I give you a tool that allow you to manage yourself or to make sure that whatever you do, you own, you control, and each one owns its own little piece. Because the Web 2, from one side, has been giving us a lot, but from the other side has been also taking from us a lot. So that's why I say it's not something we can compromise on. That's the driver.
Mm-hmm. And just sorry on that point as well. I think this becomes even more important with the emergence of AI. You know, when the internet was sort of first proliferating, it was quite decentralized. Now we're finding with this next paradigm of computing, it's appearing that it's heading in quite a centralized route. You know, hopefully open source models become the winner, and you know, we have a lot of
this
faith
is a
in
very
them.
important
Yes,
point.
yeah.
Because right now, everybody is focused on the AI, you know. But the one thing that is probably not clear is that the AI solves a lot of issues, but also generates a lot of other issues. And I explain you why. Imagine that you use the AI in the healthcare industry, okay? There is a bad decision that has been taken about a patient. Who was the decision, who had that idea?
Yeah.
Who made that decision? Was the physician? Was the AI? So if you cannot identify with absolute certainty where the nature, the genesis of that error, the AI is going to become the place where to dump all the liability.
Scapegoat.
Yeah.
So you want to be fair because you don't want to damage the AI. You want to make sure that the AI can proliferate, can grow, and can give the best value to the society, but without being, blamed for all the things that who is operating
Right.
is going to try to give to don't get the liability. So aside the deep fakes and all the other things, there is a lot that needs to be done to, the AI really needs Web3 and needs blockchain more than everything else.
Yeah, it's our time, I think. We've asked for so much data in the last decade plus. Now what are we going to do with it all? And AI is just even more imagery and data to deal with. So blockchain has come along to kind of tame that beast, and that's what the tool sets I think you're creating.
Also, the majority are focused on, I need to certify the answer of the AI. So I have an LLM that generates some statements, some sentences, and everybody that thinks about how to integrate blockchain and AI thinks, okay, I take that sentence, I create an hash, and I store in blockchain, and I can certify that that output comes from the AI. The problem is that there's not only that needs to be certified. It needs to be certified also the training set. Because if I train my model with the wrong data, I can bias my model, and my model is going to give you the answer I want because I trained it in a certain way. So it's much broader, the problem.
So technology is part of it. Philosophy is another. How are you, almost even to wrap up the conversation, how are you convincing people that not just your way is better, but the industry has its validity? You're building tools and services for them to be able to manage them, but what's happening in a bigger picture in the marketplace right now that you see? What's going on with, I guess, larger sectors, almost back to your TAM in a way, but how are you talking about this? Maybe even for investors. I mean, what are those conversations?
I don't intend this as a race. I don't intend this as a competition. I intend this as a contribution. So if we're building a castle, I want to be one of the, stone workers that built one of the cornerstones of the castle. I don't care about, necessarily building, let's say, the majority of the market, taking majority of the market. I want to build one of the most important pieces of the market that can really bring more value. And the value cannot be only financial. Otherwise, we are back to the same paradigm we were before. It's a community contribution. It's not a personal achievement. I obviously want to leave a footprint. I'm a scientist, so I want to leave a footprint behind me. But that footprint needs to be for the good of everybody, not only for my own.
So you started by saying that having a purposeful agenda is important to you. Is that similar ways that you're describing this in your dialogues? Are you driven by that?
Yeah, every single day. I mean, it's beyond financial compensation or the joy that you have of working in a cool technology, or maybe the status that's associated with working on certain projects. Ultimately, I think you've got to find something that you feel is important, because especially in our industry, there's times where things go well and not so well. I mean, if you just look at any given year, the price or sort of valuation of your project is going to go like this, right?
Yeah.
So you need something that beyond that, when things maybe aren't going so well, you need that purpose behind it. And my feeling is that with this focus on these kind of critical industries, and as we develop products and tools and start to really gain market share and make real differences in people's lives that's not just financial or not just associated with the token, that's something that becomes something you can be really proud of. And I think it's necessary if we view this as a long-term thing. Like I still imagine I'm going to be working in this in like 20, 30 years, and I need something like that to keep myself interested and motivated and proud of what I'm doing. I have a 3-year-old daughter, and I'd love in the future to be able to look back on this time in our lives and be really proud of what we've built and contributed. Yeah.
So what is your advice? I'm going to ask both of you. What would your advice be to a young professional or maybe an older professional that's making some shifts to how should they be looking at this industry for their career?
Oh, well, I think if you are young, you are just, entering in your career as a developer, or you really have a lot of time in your hands, you want to do something different. This is the place where you can really come up with any idea and make it something more. So circular is not only a layer one for the enterprises, but we are really looking a lot about how can we give tools to a single individual or a couple of friends in college to build something important. We are giving you the means to do that. So it's an exciting time. And I'm here. I work with these young professionals, and all I want to see is them succeeding, and it's the same for everybody that's going to do something on this.
Every Friday we're doing an Ask Me Anything, and the questions, we can never get to them all. So obviously we're providing.
Well, we can swap as well. We'll let the guy with the gray beard give advice to the young professionals. I'll give advice to the older guys, maybe. I think, if you're already an established professional and you're in any given industry, I think, my advice to getting into this kind of ecosystem or sector would be to just do a bit of research. I think whether you're in the music industry, obviously science and healthcare is something we focus on. It could be insurance, could be supply chain. There is ways that you can maybe get ahead of some of your peers and really have an understanding of how this kind of technology can be adapted to your industry, and maybe that will have a effect on sort of your career as well, and just your sector, more widely speaking.
Right, that's cool. Really, that's great. Obviously, circular is living up to its name, right? It's this ecosystem. It's not just about the technology. There's some philosophy involved with it. And it seems like you're building efficiencies in like an equitable ecosystem, right? So that's obviously part of your personalities and part of your technologies. Would you summarize it by saying it's like trust and empowerment, or would you say something more kind of solid, like it's transparency and security and even inclusivity? I'd just like to find out if you could have.
It's just a couple of friends saying, "Hey, let's get together and build something better."
Yeah, that's awesome.
Something good for everybody.
Right.
That's all.
Right. So I think that's going to wrap this up. This has been really, really great, and keep reaching out to us on some of the socials. You've seen them; their links probably in this video. But ultimately, we're here to work with you and listen to you, and obviously getting you up and asking you questions in this kind of format. So this is David Cutler saying, "See you next time around the block."